Welcome to the Dashboard Dojo. Today we're going to do our third session on Service Cloud reporting. So we did two back in March, one just on Service Cloud reporting basics, and then we did a second one on Service Cloud, like formulas for Service Cloud reporting. This is, I guess, what we called the Service Cloud reporting 2 today. So glad you could join us. So today we'll do just quick introductions. We'll dive into Waza and Shiai. We'll talk a little bit about OpFocus events that are upcoming and talk about some training that I'll do in June. And then go over the upcoming Dojo topics. One of my favorite people in the Salesforce world, who happens to be a buddy of mine from high school, he'll join me in June for a dojo, and he's just so knowledgeable. I feel like I could ask any reporting question or any data question to this person. So I hope you can join us. Q&A, this is an informal group. You're welcome to ask questions throughout. We'll also have some time at the end of the session for Q&A. All right, so who am I? My name is David Carnes. I'm the chairman and chief evangelist of OpFocus. We're a 70+ person consulting shop spread out across the US and Canada. We work with the revenue ops teams at SaaS companies to help them optimize their operations. It's really been a pleasure to be part of the Salesforce community. I think I'm in my 17th year in the Salesforce community. I try to introduce something about myself, and I, it's sort of unexpectedly, my father, who's in his 80s, gave us an Xbox recently. Don't ask me sort of where that idea came from, but of course I had to pick up a bunch of games and they were on sale where I went, and so I bought Assassin's Creed Valhalla, not really realizing that it's probably a game you could play for 500 hours easily. It's just vast. It's beautiful too. This is sort of what the pretty much what it looks like. So OpFocus, I mentioned, we're a consulting shop. We've been working on Salesforce since day one, so 16 years ago. I bought a $1,000 laptop and quit my job and started OpFocus. And our first client was a SaaS company, a security company in New York City. And it's just been an amazing journey ever since. So the idea for the dojo came from, I spent 3 years in Japan and saw a number of martial arts dojos and just love this spirit of people of all levels training together. Within the dojo now, I think we have about 30 recordings, including the March 9th one, and then I think it was March 23rd on the formulas for Service Cloud reporting. So back on March 9th, we talked about, like, what do we need in place to do service reporting? We talked through the case report types. We talked about some useful stuff to support Service Cloud reporting, including dynamic dashboards, filters, trending, and embedded analytics. We also stepped through the pre-configured Service Cloud dashboards and just talked about some KPIs. So all of the recordings that for all the sessions, I think we're missing one of them for the past year and a half. They're all on the Dashboard Dojo site, just dashboarddojo.com. All right, so for today, what are we going to talk about? Well, I thought to start with, there are 9 sample reports, and most of them will not be useful to you, but I just thought to mention that they're there. So in the olden days in Classic, when you looked in Salesforce, there were 75 sample reports, and you couldn't delete them. In fact, they're still there in Classic, so we'll take a look at them. There might be something that's useful to you or just to get you started. We'll also just spend a moment on hiding unwanted report types. I know we've talked about this before in the dojo. The service and support is sort of a good opportunity to hide unwanted report types if you don't use assets or you don't use solutions. Solutions is pretty ancient. Most of us don't use it. We could just hide those report types so to be less confusing to our end users. I'm putting out an APB for a field called the range field. I've read about it in 2 different docs in the documentation, and I'm wondering if anybody's seen it. I'll talk about a couple of different concepts, case spike analysis. So I worked for 3 software companies. The last one I worked for, something that was important for us to do is monitor spikes. And when you'd have a new release or if you have a new product unveiling, probably in the weeks and months after that, you might see a spike, and just monitoring those spikes. I'll talk about how to do that. We'll talk about calculating NPS. We'll talk about reporting on case escalations. So Salesforce has an ancient feature called case escalation rules that allow us to define rule entries that auto trigger an escalation. So we'll talk about what escalations are and how they're triggered and how to report on them. And then I just thought to pull up the Preconfigured Service Cloud dashboards one more time to just take another look. So before we get started, Kyle, could you, and thanks Kyle for hosting us again. Sorry, I didn't introduce Kyle Shagnon, OpFocus's event manager. Thanks for joining us, Kyle.
Happy to be here.
Could you launch the first poll?
Sure. Is that the one on escalations or the support related?
So it's the one that's the multi-select. It's got all the topics. So I'm just curious, which support related information have you reported on? It looks like the title doesn't take such a long question. So which support related information have you reported on? So just curious, looks like we've got some NPS, case volume. So this is not an exhaustive list. It just sort of, I was running down a list, and this is multi-select. Just curious what you guys have tried. So it looks like we have 0 for case escalation. So that might be good. If you're interested in learning about trending, earlier this year, we did a session on reporting snapshots. And that could be very, very valuable to just monitor what's our typical open volume of cases? What's our typical high open, high priority? You know, just looking for typical things to compare against whatever the current number is. All right, awesome. So it looks like we have 0 case escalations. Looks like we have a few NPS. I thought to talk about NPS today. It's been around for 20 years, just sort of a bulletproof concept, but reporting on it can be a little complicated. So we'll talk about that. Thank you, Kyle, for sharing that. Great. All right, did you share the results, Kyle?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. All right, so Mitch, you mentioned API call reports. I'm curious what you're doing with that. Maybe you could just add a sentence. I'd be happy to talk about it. Just curious what you mean by that. So before I move off this slide, I just thought to mention, you know, each area of reporting that you do in Salesforce, whether it be for sales, whether it be for marketing or service and support, there are some system generated fields that can be helpful. Out of the box with cases, we have the open and closed fields. I rely on those more than, let's say with filters, I rely on those more than I would the case statuses, because case status names change. And if you've hard-coded filter values in your reports, they're going to break the next time a new head of support comes on board. So when you're filtering for things that are closed cases or open, these system-generated fields are really the way to go. They're kind of future-proofing. Similarly, with age, duration, escalated, this you can see on the screenshot on the right, there are just these system-generated formulas that we can take advantage of within case reporting. So of course, the one that I'm looking for, I haven't been able to find, but, oh, API call reports are only in Classic. Oh, interesting. Thanks, Mitch. All right, so speaking of Classic, Mitch gave me the great segue here. So the sample reports, if we were to switch back to Classic, so I've got a system open here, and if I jump over here and instead of being on this screen, we go back into Classic. All right, so I've put the support folder. So in Classic, so let me start again. In Lightning, when you start in a new system, there are private report folders and public report folders. That's it. And you then can go create additional folders. In Classic, there are a handful of standard report folders. One of them is called support reports, and there is no ability, there's no action next to this. I can't delete any of these. However, what I could do in Classic is hide the folder. So there was a mechanism to do that in Classic. But these are essentially a set of starter reports. And for marketing, the marketing campaign ones, there's a couple of things that are special within that. I thought to take a look at these. There's a case history report. So in our system, case history is enabled, and we can dig into what was the old value, what was the new value, when was the change made, who made the change, which field are we talking about? And you could dig into maybe doing analysis of escalations, and when was this thing escalated, when was it de-escalated, that sort of thing. So essentially, this is using Salesforce's native logging on the case object. If we go back into setup and we go to the object manager and go under cases, we can determine which fields. So if I go under setup to the object manager to the case object and go under fields and relationships, I can click on the button over on the right called set history tracking, and we can specify, these would be things that change potentially, like the case owner changes, whether it's escalated or not changes. The priority might change on the case, maybe. The status definitely changes. Some of these things that don't change, it's not something you would typically log, but anything that's important to you, you could check the box. And then from that moment on, it would be available to you for, just going to get back to this place for later, but be available for you with this reporting. So this is just one, you don't need this sample to look at this. There's not that much here. You could just create a new case history report. So this one isn't the best example. So cases with milestones, I think to report on milestones, otherwise you might need to use a custom report type. So milestones has to do with entitlements, which is sort of an advanced feature that you can take advantage of to determine, do your customers actually, have they purchased a support pack? Are they entitled to support? And this can get very complicated fast. I don't think there's any data with milestones, but we can see there's priority, case origin, when it was open, what is the milestone? So if you have, I remember we worked with a company it was a defense contractor selling to the Canadian Navy, and they had very rigorous steps. Anytime there was a case open, there were very specific steps. Those were known as milestones that had to be followed within a case. So I don't have data set up to show you that, but there is a sample report for that. There are a couple that are related to solutions. Solutions is ancient. I don't even know if it's available in Lightning. For the first 4 or 5 years of Lightning, it wasn't available. So it's an old feature. This is kind of an example of something that you might just want to hide. And before we move on to that, I'll just say there are a couple of other ones here. Total cases created by agent, total cases opened by agent, just as a starter. So it looks like the custom date range is pretty limiting. This data isn't, where is it? Isn't it funny? You forget how things work in Classic. I guess I just need to remove the dates. There's no all time there. So if I run the report, I can see Bruce Kennedy is 19 and Catherine Brown is 14 and that sort of thing. So these aren't outstanding, but I did just think to mention that there are a few here that you could use in Classic. So while we're in Classic, I did want to show you another topic of hiding unwanted report types. And this is probably more true with Service Cloud, whether you use Service Cloud at all or whether you don't use all these features, there are report types. So there are 3 related to solutions. There are some related to assets. If you've enabled entitlements, maybe you're not using entitlements and you could hide those as well. So there are 2 ways to, so as of today, there's one way to hide unwanted report types, and that's to do it in Classic. As of the summer release, there's a new way to do it, and I'll just show you both ways. So in Classic, this always felt odd to me. To hide an unwanted report type, you actually start to create a report. So if you're an admin and you have the ability to manage report types, so you don't have to be a sysadmin. There is a checkbox on a profile that allows you to manage public report types. Sorry, I think it's manage custom report types. But the mechanism to manage it is buried within the report creation. So if I create a new report here in Classic, if I check this box that says select report types to hide, I can come in here and I can literally uncheck some of these. So it looks like solution, solution category, solution history, cases with solutions. If I remove these, and so I don't even have to save it, I'm done. I've already made this change. So now if I come back and create another report and I go under customer support reports, all those ones with solutions are now hidden and your users don't see them. So we might do the same with cases with assets if we don't use assets. Why don't I actually just show a screenshot of how that's done. Actually, I think this org is enabled now that I think of it. So I'm going to switch back to Lightning. So this org is enabled with the beta that's coming out in just a month for how to, it's a new way of using report types. So I've been showing this the last couple of dojos, but basically I have this enabled in this org. This is going to become generally available when the new release is out in June. Suddenly it's just going to look different. When you click this button, it's going to look different. So when I click on new report, basically the choose report type screen looks a little different. And there's sort of two mechanisms here. I can go ahead and see all hidden report types. So there's a link over here in the bottom left, and I can see this full list of hidden report types, including the 4 that I just hid. Now, this is allowing you to see them. And I do have an action pull down over here, and I can instead show the report type. So I can reverse that decision. There is a link here, manage and setup. And what's odd about this is that this opens the manage custom report types page, which is not related to standard report types. So I don't know why they put this button here. It says manage and setup, but there doesn't seem to be any way to manage hidden report types and setup. So especially for custom report types, it doesn't really make sense. I don't know why this is that way, but anyway. So now what I could do is, let's say I wanted to hide another one. Again, either I'm a sysadmin or I'm somebody with that manage report types permission. And if I came in here to the right of this one called cases with assets, if I select that, there's the bump out here. The bump out has some useful information in it, including what is the name. It's a standard report type. I have the button to go ahead and get started creating my report. And then I have all the objects that are represented, this is quite a long list. And then down below, I can see all the fields. So this is kind of a nice new mechanism, but sticking with this, how do I hide this report type? If I don't want it, I just click on that action menu and I can go ahead and hide the report type. So we're talking about reporting on Service Cloud. It may seem odd that I'm telling you how to hide things that you're not using, but it seemed like a good time, especially when the reality is people don't tend to use all of these features. So if you don't use knowledge, you could go ahead and hide the report type on knowledge, for example. All right, so that's the hiding unwanted report types. So keep your eyes open for the summer 22 release. You may need to train users on that new there's that change coming when they click the new report button, that first step. Hopefully it's easier for people. Okay, so I mentioned putting out an APB for a field. I found in 2 docs in help reference to, so this, I've got it highlighted in yellow here. You can run case lifecycle reports to view the results of the range field, which indicates the length of time since the case last changed status or owner. So that seems kind of useful. That's different than escalated. Is this thing escalated or not? So the range field, I just can't find it. So it mentions case lifecycle reports, and I see it in 2 different places. Oddly, it's mentioning it under custom report types, which doesn't really make sense to me that they would put it here. This feels like this bullet is in the wrong place. But anyway, when I went ahead and created a new report on the case lifecycle report type, the range field isn't there. So just curious if anybody's used that. I'd love to figure out how to, maybe I need to turn something on. I hunted through the settings and just didn't find it. So anyway, well, I'll share back with the group if I hear anything. If any of you know about it, please let me know. All right, so let's shift gears. Let's talk about spike analysis. So I remember 20 years ago working at a software company. I managed all the corporate apps by day. I did all the ops at night, and I loved it, all the reporting and data work. But by day, I managed the systems, and one of the systems was an old CRM system where we did our ticket tracking. And we would have all of these patches to our software. So this is in the days before SaaS. On-prem software, you'd release a patch and then customers would take their sweet old time applying the patches to your software. And you'd see the spike in cases when people got around to apply patches. So the support manager approached me and said, hey, could we figure out how to analyze the spikes? And kind of a simple way to do this, and I've shown something very similar in different cases in the Dojo before, but basically you could just use a simple case trending. So the open dates of all your cases. If the cases are closed, you also know all the closed dates. But in this case, we'll focus on the open dates. And what you might do, there's an open date field that exists on your on the case report type. So if you create a report on the case report type, you've got that open date. Well, you can create a simple formula called open date 2, and I've got the screenshot of the formula over here on the left. Very simple formula, literally just pulling in that open date 1 into the open date 2. And then what you do is group the report twice. The first time you group it, and I've got here in this top screenshot, grouping it, that open date by the calendar month and year. And then the second time you group that second column, just grouping it on the calendar year. And what this gives you is a year over year. So I've only got 2 years here, 2021 and 2022 in this data set. But if I had 5 years of case history, I could see the seasonality, but I might also be able to see spikes. You might also choose to view this by weeks. Weeks might be more granular, related to updates or changes in your product that you want to monitor over time. But for our support manager at that software company, it was very important to her to be able to attribute, and sort of differentiate, are these standard problems or are these problems we've created for ourselves by putting out a patch? And then suddenly there's a whole bunch of cases related to the patch. So anyway, this is just one idea for support reporting, just using very simple trending. All right, let's shift gears. So a few of you said that you've done work with Net Promoter Score. This is not a new concept. I think in 2001, this guy Reichheld, sorry. I think he initially released some of this concept. Maybe it was a Harvard Business School article back in like 2001, 2002. I think the book came out in 2006. But basically, this idea of, if you could ask one question of your customers, what would it be? It's sort of, a lot of us come up with these surveys that have 100 questions on them. A, nobody wants to answer 100 questions. B, there's just a lot of mushiness with that. What if we boiled it down to one question? And that question is, how likely would you be to recommend us to someone in your network? So that sort of cuts through all the crud and gets right to the heart of the matter. What does somebody think of you, and are they willing to put their reputation at stake? So what they did is they said, if we asked this question and had 11 choices, I don't know why they have 11. Going from 0 through 10 is 11 choices. Why did they just go through 1 through 10? They could have also just done 1 to 3. Yes, maybe, no. It'd be the same, but they have 11 choices for some reason. So if, what they say is that the NPS score is the percentage of promoters, and it's not the $ of detractors. That's funny. It's percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors, but you don't show it as a percentage. You actually show it as a number. So if, let's say that I have, let's say I have 100 people respond and 50 of them are promoters. They're 9s or 10s. And 10 of them are 7s or 8s, and then the rest of them are 6 or below. So that means I have 50 and I have 40. There are 10 in the middle. Those are essentially ignored. That are the yellows, the passives. But if I have 50 that are promoters and I subtract the 40 that are detractors, I essentially have a net promoter score of 10. So the NPS score is shown as an integer, not as a percentage. And the range, you could have 100% negative if you're just a total disaster of a company. You could have 100% positive if you are just the sweetest thing, since cherry pie. but most companies are somewhere in the middle. I don't know that I've seen a negative, but I'm sure they're out there. So this concept, Fred Reichheld, I think they've released a second version of this book. So this is not a new concept. It's been around for 20 years. And it's interesting how this applies across industries. So how might you implement the NPS score if you've never done it before? Well, on the AppExchange, there are quite a listing of apps that are out there, and you could go down this route. There are many, many survey tools. There have been many, many of them over the years. With NPS, you're only asking one question. So it kind of begs the question, do you need a full-on survey tool to manage this? You could actually collect the information outside of Salesforce, and you could create a custom object in Salesforce and store your one answer. You could do it that way and do a data load, once a month with your answers. So you don't need an AppExchange app to pull this off. You just need some way to survey a group, collect their responses, and then you need a place to store it in Salesforce if you want to report on it. So I went the second route. I didn't bother with an AppExchange app. I just created a custom object, and I'll show you that now. So to do this, what I did is I created a custom survey object, and I had a field, how likely would you be to recommend? And I allowed scores of 0 to 10. Now, full disclosure, I didn't build a validation rule to enforce this, but I guess I allow 0 to 99 because I created that custom field allowing 2 digits, and it's a number field. So ultimately what we want to enforce is just 0 to 10. And then what I did is, so I created the custom field. I created a custom object, and I created a custom field called how likely to recommend. And then what I did is I created a report. And there's 2 different ways to do the math, and I'll just show you both ways. So down here on the bottom screenshot, on the custom object, I created a field that referenced the how likely to recommend field, and just converted the 0s, 2s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, all those numbers. It converted it into a 1, a 0, or a -1. So a 1 if it's a promoter, a 0 if they're a passive, and a -1 if they're a detractor. And then, so in this, what I did is so you could do this as a formula field to determine the 1s, the 0s, or the -1s, or directly on the report, you could just create a bucket column. And you can see here, I've got a bucket column. So these numbers should all be identical. This column here, the NPS math, is my custom formula field on the custom object. The bucket is what I created directly on the report. It really doesn't matter. And then ultimately what you want to do is do the math. And that math you would never show at the subtotal level. You'd really just show it at the grand total level. So for this data set, it has an NPS score of 14. So let's go see how this is built out. All right, so looks like I've got some other windows open here. Okay, great. So I created this custom object called NPS response. I basically created a lookup to the account. I created a lookup to the contact. This data set has no contacts, so the account is a little more useful for me. Here's my big question. How likely would you be to recommend? You can see here that it's a number that allows essentially up to 2 digits, which would mean you could put up to 99 on that. In real life, I'd probably limit that using a validation rule, but we don't have to go that far today. So then I've got my NPS math field here. And just to show that you could do it directly on the custom object, so if how likely to recommend is above 8, greater than 8, give it a 1. That's a promoter. If how likely to recommend, so there's a comma here, it's else. If how likely to recommend is less than 7, so basically it means 6 or below, then have it be -1, else the 2 in the middle, the 7s and the 8s, are 0s. So very, very simple formula. I found something on just Googling NPS Salesforce formula from 2012. So it was literally 10 years old. And it was a little bit more complicated how they approached it. I looked at it going, oh my gosh, we could do, you can just get rid of half of this complicated formula to just do this math. And the math works out just fine with half of the stuff. So this is what that looks like. And, kind of the key here is that the NPS is not shown as a percentage, though we kind of need the percentages to do the math. So that math is buried, and it's buried in two different ways. So I did it as a custom formula field, and then I also did it as a bucket column. So here's my column here with the actual results. So it looks like I've got 7 responses. I've got a 10, I've got a 1 and a 7, a 9, a 4. So they're kind of all over the place. And if it's a 10, that would mean it's a 1, that's a promoter. If it's a 1, it would translate into a -1, etc. So this is the ultimate formula here where I'm coming up with the score. So let's go take a quick look at that. And there's really not that much to it. So this is a summary formula field on my report. And if I click on the formula, I can see that really what I'm doing is I'm saying, go ahead and take this field from this object, the NPS response object, and I'm pulling in the math field. Now, I also could just pull in that bucket. So, I'm showing 2 different ways to do it here, but you do have the bucket column. You can have up to 5 bucket columns per report. You can use these in your summary formulas as well. So 6 in one, half dozen the other, it really doesn't matter unless you need to preserve one custom field. In enterprise, you can have 500. So we're using 1. Maybe because of that, I'd argue that the bucket field would be better because it doesn't consume a custom field. But basically, I'm saying, however I'm doing the math, divide that by the row count and then multiply it by 100. Now, the other secret ingredient here is to go onto the display tab. And instead of the default of showing this math at all summary levels, which would basically give you 100%, 0%, 100%, 0%, something like that, instead, I just want to show it at the grand total. So that's how I end up with this 14. So I thought this was kind of nice to be able to generate this, so easily. It felt like it was more complicated. When I first looked at this, and it basically was the percentage of promoters minus, and this should be percentage of detractors. I was like, all right, now how do we do the math between percentages, and how does that work? And the output is an integer, not a percentage. So anyway, the easiest way to do it that I came up with was this way. I'm curious for any of you that are doing Net Promoter Score, do you do anything similar like this? Or I'm curious how you guys are pulling it off. Maybe you could throw it into the chat. All right. So another topic for today is case escalations. I noticed none of you have said that you've worked with case escalations. This is an ancient feature in Salesforce, and it predates workflow rules. This is how old this is. It's a rule-driven feature, and what that means is you create a rule and you define rule entries, and then based on those rule entries, you can trigger an escalation, and the escalation allows you to change the owner of the case. It allows you to send a notification, and you can do both. The other thing that happens behind the scenes is it flags the case as escalated, and there's a little icon that you can display, and there's this field that you can show and do math on. So what I thought to do here is talk about, let's do just a simple calculation of how many of our total cases that are open are escalated. And you might monitor that as a ratio. Maybe there's some normal level of sort of chatter. There's a normal level of chatter sort of on the wire, normal amount of escalated cases, and suddenly we have more escalated cases. We've got another poll here. Kyle, could you throw that out? I know all of you said that you're not using case escalations. I'm curious if any of you, maybe you're doing it a different way. So you could achieve escalations through something like flow. You could do more activities. So it looks like we've got some nopes. Okay, we've got somebody that's using standard escalation rules. So something that companies look to do that use escalations is just monitor the stuff that's escalated, right? These are potentially the priority cases, the problem cases. Another type of case that I monitored all those years ago were the priority 1 cases for our customers. All right, so we've got one using the standard escalation rule. We've got custom escalation rules. We've got a whole bunch of nope. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. So to just dig into this a little bit more, this is what this ancient feature called escalation rules looks like. And essentially, as a case is created, it is being monitored for fields that you specify. And so there's one active escalation rule. Within that active escalation rule, there are rule entries. And your rule entries could look like this. If the billing country is US or USA or United States or United States of America, and the service level agreement, that's what SLA is, equals platinum, and the case priority is high, then we might want to trigger an escalation sooner than if it's a medium or low, or if it's a gold or a silver, or et cetera. So your highest priority customers and their highest priority cases would trigger an escalation sooner, essentially. So this is not new at all. I think I still. Okay, so here is in setup. I've gone under setup, service, and escalation rules. I just have the one standard rule where I got the screenshot from. And what you essentially do is, this is top-down processing. So, a case is created, the clock starts ticking. I guess I don't know how often this cycles. Is it every 10 minutes or 15 minutes? But it's looking for things that are aging within each of these categories. So the customer's a platinum customer, it's a high priority case. So if I come in here, what you can do is you essentially define triggers for your escalation actions. So after 2 hours and 0 minutes, we're going to reassign this to this guy, David. We're going to send him an email, and we're going to use this email template. So the other side thing that this does is it flags the case that it's escalated. So this now is an escalated case. And just to show you, why this is meaningful. So I don't want to change the rule. If I come in and edit the action, so you can do hours and you can do minutes. So if you remember working with like process builder or workflow rules, those were hours or days that you could set the time triggers. This is a feature that will trigger in minutes. So you could have it be for 30 minutes, so 0 hours and 30 minutes, et cetera. And then these are the actions. You can notify someone. You can have additional emails. So maybe you notify the case owner and you notify their boss, something like that. And then you can also change the owner. And you can change the owner to a queue as well. Okay, so why did I mention all this? Well, this can impact reporting as well. So if we come in here and we talk about reporting on case escalations, so we might do a simple percentage of all of our open cases. What percentage of those are escalated? And again, much like we did before, we'll just report this at the grand total level. It doesn't make sense to report it at either the not escalated or escalated, because each would be 100% of itself. But this 18 out of 177 is roughly that, just over 10% in this screenshot here. And the formula itself is very, very simple. So what I would probably look to do is actually create a reporting snapshot and just trend this. So every week, Monday morning, maybe whatever time is right for you guys, every week just use a reporting snapshot and just capture what is the current escalated percent of our cases. So if we go back into our system, I've got the report here, and we'll just take a quick look at it. So this is using those system generated formula field, whether it's escalated or not. This is just a checkbox. And what I've done is I've just grouped the report by escalated, and I can see in the sample data here, I've got 16 that are not escalated and 4 that are escalated. 4 into 20 is 20%. So that formula, the data is not appearing at the summary level it's only appearing at the grand total level. And the way that I did that is, again, in the formula. So basically, I've got the escalation state, and that's what the field's called under the hood. I guess I didn't even realize that. And we're summing that up and we're dividing it by the row count. So very simple. I'm making this a percentage with 2 decimal places. And then again, I'm just showing the formula output at the grand total level. So when I apply that and run that, we see our percentage looks like the 10.17% out of 177 records. So I can see different variations of this. You might do the same thing with cases by priority. I don't know how often your priorities change. Certainly escalations change. Things become not escalated, hopefully. So you might do the same type of reporting on whether something's escalated or not, or sorry, has a high priority or not. All right, so when we met last time, we talked about the pre-configured Service Cloud dashboards. We went through them to a pretty exhaustive level. Kyle, can you throw that into the chat?
Yes.
So this is, these aren't perfect, but this whole bunch of ideas that you can take advantage. In that last session back in March on Service Cloud reporting, we went through each one of these and talked about them. But there could be some good ideas for you that you can poach from this. All right. So, as a recap, we talked about the sample support reports. We talked about hiding unwanted report types. It seems like the range field is still a mystery. I'll have to reach out to submit a case to Salesforce to try to figure out that mystery. We talked about case spike analysis, calculating the NPS score, reporting on case escalations. I did notice that there is a service metrics badge on Trailheads, not that complicated. So if you're newer to reporting on service metrics, there might be a couple of ideas in here that are useful for you. We do have an event coming up on June 7th. So 2 good friends of mine, Lauren Kelly, who's the CEO of OpExChange, and Heidi Thompson, who leads RevOps at a company called Uncork. So they're going to be talking about, in fact, I'll be joining them to host the panel, but we'll be talking about the downstream implications of revenue reporting decisions. So I think this really sounds interesting. They both are experts in their field. This is June 7th in the afternoon, 1 o'clock Eastern. I'll also be back in the classroom. This is our old classroom in our old office when we used to do these things in person, but now it's all virtually. I'll teach our 5-day admin class June 13th to the 17th, and also our 2-day hands-on reporting workshop June 28th and 27th, 28th. So we've got some upcoming Dojo sessions. The next one on the 25th, hope you'll join us. We'll do dashboard makeovers. If any of you have a dashboard that you'd like another set of eyes on, it would be a lot of fun for me. Maybe if you'd share a screenshot with me, I could recreate that in my own environment and just talk about a makeover. So I haven't had any submissions yet for that. That would be really great to have somebody share something that they'd love a fresh set of eyes for. On June 8th, we've had to try something different. Something called Masters in the Dojo interview series. So Ezra is one of the smartest people I know in the Salesforce world. Just super, super knowledgeable. He was a stand-up comic on the side in the past, so he's hilarious. And he just knows a lot. He's created a lot of tools just over the years. So anyway, he'll join me. I'll be quizzing him on favorite features, things he thinks people should know, stuff like that. He's just so knowledgeable. He was texting me the other night. There were some new formula capabilities and new functions, and we were debating some of the functions. This is at the level that he thinks about stuff. So that's at dashboarddojo.com. So I hope you can join us for that. Any questions or anything on people's minds regarding Service Cloud reporting? So today's session hasn't been very interactive. Sorry about that. But if there are any topics that you want to talk about, I'd be happy to address them. So I noticed that Jean-Say was at Northeast Dreamin'. Don't know if anyone else, if you guys haven't been to those community events, there are probably about 30 of them around the world now, and they're fantastic. So this was the first one, I think, in quite a while that was in person. I got to meet Jean-Say in person, was it 2 weeks ago, down in Providence. It was just outstanding to be there. All right.
Sherry had a question about how they can submit a dashboard snippet for
all right, so guys, I'm going to throw my email address in here. Don't share it widely. No, just kidding. But if you want to just share something with me, I'm happy to take a look at it, and I might ask you a couple questions. But that would be a lot of fun to just have some actual stuff to do a makeover, and we can figure out how to anonymize. Make sure that it's not giving away any corporate secrets or anything. All right, so Kathy, great question. So the thing about reporting on knowledge reports is having to set up knowledge in order to take advantage of the reporting. And it's not just the setting up, it's actually creating a bunch of articles and stuff. I haven't done something on knowledge. I think it could be a topic that we dive into. It's probably just general laziness to not set up a whole knowledge thing in a custom environment. Why don't we just so that isn't fun even when you use it all the time. Oh no. Oh no, that sounds too bad. Knowledge has changed a little bit over the years. I remember when Salesforce acquired the French company, and I taught for Salesforce at the time, and I had a whole group of their engineers in from France. I was teaching out at Salesforce headquarters, and it was really interesting. I understood why it was really the first acquisition that they absorbed in, and it felt so different to be an admin for knowledge. It was completely different, but I think that these orgs are enabled for knowledge. And so what I could probably do is, take a slice in a future session. I'm sorry we didn't address that today, Kathy, but I just need to make sure that the licenses are set up, and then set up article types and stuff like that to get in and report on that. So Sherry asked the question about the report and dashboard workshop. So I've been doing them 3 times a year, and it's very selfish. There are 3 major releases a year for Salesforce. So I taught again in February and March, right after the spring release. I'll teach in June, right after the summer release, and most likely, I think the winter release for 2023 will be in October. So that would be the next time that I would do the 2 sessions. All right, any other questions? I'd love to hear what you guys are doing with Service Cloud, and what you're challenged with. So hearing, Kathy, that you're working on knowledge is helpful. Just knowing what's important to people for reporting topics. All right. Well, great to see you, Jean-Say. Guys, so good spending the time together. Thank you for being part of the Dashboard Dojo. I hope you can join us on the 25th of May for the next session. Thanks. Thanks,
Thank you, everyone. Of course.